Y'all always know I got to start off with my do 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 do. In case y'all didn't know, that clears up the voice. I used to be a singer back in the days when I was going through school. So they used to give us that do re mi fa sol la ti do.
Right.
So y'all know that's why I start my shows like that. So salutations and blessings to all of my people who are out there in Hill Out of No Land. I want to say I appreciate you all joining me on this snowy but glorious days. If you are in the East Coast, yes, East Coast, Midwest, all of us, we're getting all that glorious snow. And I won't forget my people up there in the Oregon and West and Washington atmosphere. You're all getting it too. California, y'all gets it in the May area time. I don't know why y'all get it in the crazy area, but y'all get it in the May time for some reason. But I want to bring y'all in because we have a magnificent show planned for you today. And because of this show, I am great. I am here to say I am grateful, grateful, grateful for you all tuning in. I know I have new listeners. I know I have returning listeners. Either way, like I said, I am grateful. With that being said, we're going to learn some things today. And I have a magnificent person who is joining me today. She's going to bring some light to her field. She's going to educate us, give us some knowledge. If y'all don't want me to say the K, take the K off. Give us some knowledge on what she does. She's going to enlighten us on who she is. She has a array of knowledge and extensive work in her field. She goes from the white coats to the orange coats. And she also talks to the people in between and on the outsides. Her extensive background in the field she does shows how passionate she is about what she does. And I will tell you that if you see one set of footprints in the sand, that lets you know that she's being carried when it's those times when she don't know where to go. I bring to you all, I said, present to you all, certified in her field, Miss Luci Eddins. Did I say last name right?
Eddins, but
that's what I
either
said,
one works.
Eddins.
Either
I
one
said
works.
Luci Eddins.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be with you today. I appreciate you having me on. Like I was telling you, I've never done anything like this before, quite like this before. But I've had some friends in the past tell me, "Oh, you should start a podcast," and I'm like, I don't know anything about that. So I'm going to be learning from you too today. We learn together.
Hey, that is awesome. That is why I'm here. I'm here to help people walk in the door.
Yeah.
I do not close it. I always keep it open.
Yeah.
Miss Eddins, Miss Luci, I'll always start off with 3 questions. My first one is, how is everything going for you?
I love that question. Well, like we talked about, it's been very cold where I am. I live in a very tiny town nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains, so western North Carolina. And we have been getting lots of snow, lots of cold weather. I love the slowness that winter brings. I think that it's kind of nature's way of giving us the gift of some resting time, which I've been taking full advantage of. So I've been happy about that. But yeah, I mean I'm good. I'm blessed. I've been growing this business. I just launched my own private practice a couple months ago now. And have been slowly learning the more businessy elements of that. That's something that I didn't have a ton of prior experience with before starting my own practice. I have a ton of clinical experience, but the business side of it is all new for me. So I've been learning about networking and taxes, and so what it means to lead a team and things like that. So it's been an interesting learning experience, the kind that sort of builds up your brain muscle. So I'm grateful to be there.
And learn about all the stuff they don't tell you in school.
That's right. Right. I really encourage. I had a intern counselor ask me the other day, what's your big piece of advice if you want to go into private practice? And I said, take a business class. Take a business class. I think maybe everybody should take a business class. It's a very different world than I thought it was going to be originally. So, yeah.
I'm good. It's just like we spoke earlier. I'm just enjoying the the gifts nature gives me during this time of year. And
Mhm.
then I don't want to open them all at one time. I want to open them all as
Yeah.
I get through playing with one, then I want to go open another. Uh,
Mhm.
my
Mhm.
second question is, how are you doing mentally?
Oh, I love that question. Today or in general?
Just period.
Just period
Whichever
in
you want to
general.
talk about.
Okay, I love it. How am I doing mentally? I would say, I mean, what I'm noticing right now is that I'm pretty tired today. I will say that. With this new sort of learning experience that I've been on, of course, comes with its own trials and tribulations, and navigating that as a person now in a leadership position is, like I said, all brand new. Um, so with that, I think has come a certain tiredness. It's a good tiredness though. It's like the tired that you are after you work out or after you do something that's, you know, generative for your person and your body. But I feel like lately I have been just so many things going on mentally. I mean, feeling, of course, like we talked about, the gratitude for the season and for the slowness. I'm also just daily thinking about, uh, grieving with the folks who have a difficult time in the winter, whether that's just because of their physical circumstance, whether it's holiday stress. Um, as a counselor, I obviously work with a ton of different people from a ton of different backgrounds, and with that comes a certain exposure to a higher level of emotional experience than probably the average person comes into contact with. So I can't help but feel sort of a range of emotions at all times. But in terms of my own life and my own experience and learning and tired, but a good tired.
I get that because good tired's are those where you be like, I feel so good. Oh,
Yes,
and you can just
yes, it's
exhale and breathe at the same time. And it's one of
that's
those where you be
right.
like, oh,
That's right. It's
I
the
just
kind of
did.
tired where
Oh,
you lay down, your head hits the pillow at night and you're asleep. You're
yeah,
immediately asleep.
I, it's one of those to where you know immediately like, well, let me just go lay down. Let me just go stretch out. As soon as you stretch out, it's over.
Hmm.
You wake up
That's
3
right.
hours later, like, man, was I asleep? And
That's
so
right. That's
it's
right.
one of those. So you mentioned that you're grateful, your gratitude. How
Hmm.
do you manage your mental health to keep it in a grateful gratitude place? Because we don't always stay grateful and be in a gratitude and be in a good
Yeah.
spot. Sometimes we get in those bad spots. So
Yeah.
it's in those times where we are our scale is unbalanced. How do we keep your scale balanced for mental health?
Well, that's a great question, and I'm thinking about, you know, as humans, our emotions all have a function to them. You know what I mean? I think there's a lot. I hear a lot of uh, rhetoric and teaching around the management of emotions, and that is important in terms of, you don't want to allow yourself to be swept away by your emotional experience. You don't want it to overtake you. You don't want to feel like you're drowning in your own whatever it is that's happening. And then at the same time, the other side of that coin is when something tragic happens, you should be sad. When something scary happens, you should be afraid. Um, and when something positive happens, you should feel the joy of that. So I think for me, in managing my own emotional experience as a person who tends to feel emotions pretty largely and deeply, I think that's maybe one of the reasons why I became a counselor in the first place. I try to focus a lot on, um, when I'm having maybe a more overwhelming emotional experience. I try to focus a lot on taking care of my body, noticing the things that are happening around me, and making sure that I'm in an environment where, uh, experiencing bigness of emotions is not going to cause any problems for me, if I'm at work or something like that. Um, So I try to focus on being a little bit more intentional about allowing myself to experience the emotions that come up for me, and honoring whatever it is that brought up the emotion, whether it's, something that I experience as positive or negative. And then at the same time, trying really hard to maintain care of myself in those moments, because it's easy to neglect that. So I try. I'm not a big routine person. I don't know that I have a set of things that I do every day. I know a lot of people like a specific morning routine, or like, this is what I do to wind down for the day. I don't really have those kinds of things. What I do try to focus on, though, is more of a rhythm versus a routine. So slow, intentional mornings, whether it's like, yoga one day, sleeping in the next day. My mornings are slow and intentional, and that's the time that I take for myself. Rhythm throughout the day of in between clients, making sure that I'm doing something for myself, go on a walk, or listening to a podcast, something like that. And then, allowing myself to slow back down at night. So I like to focus on rhythm versus routine. That's just what works for me. I think routines work really well for a lot of people, though. So,
do what's best for you. That's the key.
Yeah.
Do what's best for you. And the
Yeah.
Hell I Don't Know podcast is available on all formats, by the way. She says she listens to podcasts. Available on all formats.
I love it. Well, I listened.
If you can't plug your
to
own stuff, why do you ask other people to do it? So, that's why I'm like, okay, Hell I Don't Know podcast is available on all formats.
I listened to your I listened to a few episodes. I listened to your brief episode with, I don't remember her name, but she was fun.
Miss Christina Jones. She runs the Unlearning to Learning This podcast. She's a frequent visitor, and I'm a frequent visitor on hers. At the end of each year, we try to do like a combo episode.
I love it.
I think I started like a year or two ago, called What Now, where we both talk about what's next for both of our podcasts.
Yeah.
And it's
That's
like
fun.
it's like my end of season, and it's like her end of season.
Gotcha.
And it's called like What Now. And so I'll bring her on, and I'm like, hey, what you got going on? What I got going on? And it's like the end of this Hell I Don't Know podcast. And so
sure. So to wrap everything up and set intentions for the next season. I love it. Can I ask about I was curious about the name of your podcast. Where does that come from?
Of this podcast? So, because I reached out to you on a different podcast. The book I read is a different podcast. Yeah, that's a different podcast. Okay. That's a whole nother genre from this one.
So you have more than one.
I have 3 with the creation of a 4th one coming up.
Really?
And so that way I'm running the entire year, because this one runs from September to the first week of June, and then it's done. But most of them I've either already recorded because it's me, and then I do a guest in between. And then the sports podcast runs from February to like August, like when nothing's going on. I'm just, it's because there's no sports really going on except WNBA. So I have something to talk about. And then the book podcast, that's like reading a book. I don't really have no set time to put them out. It's just, I just do them. But the good thing about that is I call, when I talk to people, I label them the book of whoever I'm talking to. It's just episode such and such, and it's called the book of whoever I'm talking to. But when I do a episode interviewing or doing history inside of the book podcast, I call it the chapter. It'd be episode such and such, the chapter of. So the book podcast was created for artists, much like the 4 or 5 that you put in your story today. So, like all of them, I'm like, yep, I'm going to tell I need to talk to that person. I need to talk to that person. I need to talk to that person, because
I love it.
It's as a creative person myself, I know it's not always an avenue for you to just talk about what your creativity was inside of the process of writing those books and putting those quotes out and doing stuff. So I referenced it as like reading Rainbow back in the day for me. Mr. LeVar
Mhm.
Burton made it possible to just read all types of books without having to judge people because of their background or color. He read all the books because of the history that was in the books. So my book
Mhm.
podcast or book series or book television show, whatever it is, that's what it's based off on. I talk to whoever I want, whenever I want. If they say no,
Yeah.
I understand. I'm not mad. I don't like, okay, whenever you get time, come back. I'm
Yeah.
easy to work
Yeah.
with. But if you don't want to talk because I don't have enough followers, then just say that. Don't say that you don't have time.
Cool.
Just say you don't want to talk. I'm cool with it.
Isn't
I'm
that
not
fun?
mad at it.
Sure.
But just remember,
Sure.
when all them people start flowing in, just remember what you told me because of those
Sure.
numbers. Now,
And that's real.
the hell I don't know.
Yeah. That's what I'm
It's
curious
been a
about.
while since I've been asked that question. It
Mhm.
came from uh, almost 2006. I think it was 2006. We was getting ready to go on a deployment, and
Mhm.
me and my buddies had signed up for a 3-on-3 tournament, and we was like, "Hey, what's gonna be the name? What's gonna be the name?" I was like, "Hell, I don't know," and we wasn't thinking about it, and then so I was the only one left there, and
Yeah.
I wrote down, "Hell, I don't know," and then
Yeah.
so we were sitting down talking, and it was like they called our name, and they said the next group is Hell, I don't know. Hell, I don't know. They said, who they calling? I said, oh, that's what I put our name down as.
Yeah.
So 10 years later, uh, well, we'd always just said that and started laughing as we
Mhm.
went through life. And so when I told them
Yeah.
I was starting a podcast, I had originally called it I Said That because I had a group on Facebook called I Said That. But then I told
Mhm.
them, I said, um, I think I'm going to call my podcast Hell, I Don't Know Podcast. And they said,
That's
go ahead, bro.
so
Go ahead,
fun.
bro. You can do it. And so
Yeah.
now I they said if somebody gonna use it, it's gonna be you. And so
Yeah.
now that's where it come from is hell I don't know because sometimes you be like hell I don't know what's
That's
gonna happen I don't know what's gonna go on I don't know what I'm gonna do but
that's right.
uh, God I
Yeah.
know you're gonna take care of it
That's
or
right.
whoever you like it's
Yeah.
that's it has nothing to do with the first three letters in it
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I found it you spoke about business it's hard for me to get that copyrighted trademarked or any of that because of the
I'm
hell
sure
inside of the
because of
title
the hell
so
part.
yeah, I even
I'm
tried to
sure.
get it in LLC, but they were like, "Oh, you can't use hell as a LLC." I'm like, "That's crazy." So
What?
it's
What?
yeah. So I
Mhm.
that's why I use Teddyism dot
Yeah.
LLC presents because it falls under my LLC. So now
Sure.
I own it that way.
Yeah.
Which I do all my podcasts like that. I started off like that anyway with Teddyism presents whatever the podcast name was, but then I
Sure.
went away from it because the title was too long. But now
Gotcha. Yeah.
since I started seeing that I can have a bunch of things fall under my LLC, which is this is the podcast is one of them. I'm
That's
like,
right.
I'm starting to get more of the business mind. Like you
Yeah.
said, you don't when you start the business, you don't know all of these things. You
Yeah.
find them out as you go.
That's
But
right.
that's the good thing about social media. You got a lot of people that's telling you how to do it, and you
Yeah.
also got in the comments people be like, "Why are you telling me this for free?" I'm just
Yeah.
looking at them like, "Why are you worried about? Why are they telling you this for free? Obviously,
Yeah.
someone's learned it, and they
Right.
want to tell you.
Just receive it.
Just listen. Yeah,
Just
I
just
mean,
take the
take it
information.
in." So
Yeah.
but that's where the hell I don't know comes from, and so
I
I've been
love it.
using it for this. This is the third season, so it's each season I learned something different about
Mhm.
podcasting. So it's
Yeah.
the first season I did 13 episodes. The second season I
Okay.
did 35 to 40 episodes. This season
Mhm.
I'm consistent with the 40 episodes. I drop like one every week.
Yeah.
From it depends on the episode in August. Depends on
Okay.
if it's I do a lot of history episodes.
Hmm.
And so like I just did Bass Reeves a few weeks ago.
Okay.
So if he died on a specific particular date or if his anniversary of his birthday was on a particular date, then I'm gonna
Mhm.
make sure that that episode comes out around the time that it's either his birthday,
Yeah.
uh, the day he died, or the day he did
Mhm.
something to get a medal of honor.
That's
So I
meaningful.
plan that
Yeah.
episode to come out around that time. So
Sure.
then I bounce all the other episodes, like Valentine's Day coming up next month. I
Hmm.
do an episode before that week. I do an episode after the week. And then
Right.
everything else just falls into place. And so
Right.
it just ends up with me being June 2nd or the June 7th as the last episode that I do. So as long as I
Yeah.
get the first week and the second week, all the rest of them will fall in the middle.
Yeah.
So
I'm just like mentally taking notes. I feel like I'm in a podcast master class right now in case I ever ever decide to start one. You know, I kind of forget that these things are here. I don't spend a ton of time on social media. It's not something that I generally enjoy. I enjoy, you know, like the sharing of my day and kind of keeping people up with what I'm doing. And I love to see when friends have big events, you know, have babies and you know, are getting married and things like that. But for the most part, I find social media to be the amount of information to just be overwhelming. You know, so I kind of forget that these things are here. So when you reached out to me, I was like, oh, that is something that is a thing that you know that I can do. So I was more than excited to come on and chat with you. So thank you for having me. I don't know if I said that yet.
it's interesting that you said it because I don't spend a lot of time on social media either. As
Yeah,
much as I said all that, I don't
yeah,
spend a lot of time on Facebook. I don't spend a lot of time on Instagram. If
hmm,
I get a message, because most of my guests send messages through Facebook or like for you, I
hmm,
I've seen the posts that you do. I'll share them, and then
hmm,
for some odd reason, people share people's posts, but they don't tag them. I tag everybody's posts that
yeah,
I share because I want them to see that, hey, this person said something interesting. And
yeah.
so
Give credit.
as I
Sure.
tag them, then that tag will go to that particular person so they can see someone's out
Hmm.
there looking at what you did. Someone
Yeah,
is interested in what you said. That also gives me the link to always go back and see that person's post
yeah,
because I'm
yeah,
always uh a well, as you know, as I'm always on your page to see, okay, let me see what she posted today because I want to because
hmm,
I like what she posted. And then
yeah.
that also gives me a link to some other people that you're reposting.
Sure.
And you're reposting because what you like is now entwined with most of the algorithm stuff that I'm
Right.
normally going to like.
Right.
And because that gives me access to your stories too. And
Absolutely.
as I like today, I just told you those 5 people you posted in your story today, those authors and that was talking about
Yeah.
ADHD and the counseling stuff. That's
Yeah.
interesting to me because now I can talk to those people and say,
Sure.
hey, uh, I have an
Yeah.
audience that deals with ADHD. I just talked to a person that comes up in episode 86. Uh,
Hmm.
he's a film producer and he's a public speaker that he
Hmm.
deals with ADHD. And it was just until he
Yeah.
became an adult that
Yeah.
he didn't really understand about
Right.
ADHD. So, you know, that'll be interesting and that'll be a good line for her.
Yeah.
So I'm
You know,
willing to have those conversations.
right. Well, I do think that social media, you know, like the design of social media is not set up to properly foster community on it. Like a lot of people talk about, like, I want my social media to be for community and I want this to be a community building space. But there takes a certain level of intentionality in order to be able to do because the way that it's set up doesn't lend itself well to that. Because like you said, you can share someone's work on social media and not give them credit for it just by design, right? And there's really no other area of life where that's the case. Like you can't publish somebody else's book under your name. That's you know, it's with laws against it. Or, you know, when you are like in an
It's called
actual face
copyright and
to
plagiarism.
right. And then when you're in an actual face-to-face community, if you are stealing somebody else's ideas or you're behaving in a way that's not showing that kind of integrity, somebody's probably going to call you out for it, you know, or there's going to be some sort of social consequence. In social media, that tends to not be the case. And so, you know, I always tell people social media absolutely can be a space for community building and it can be used in that way, but you have to be intentional, you know, and it sounds like you are, and I appreciate it because it's kind of hard to find.
Even on TikTok, when that TikTok took all that bad rep, I said, well, you know, TikTok is not really that bad. It's just what you look at.
Sure.
That's because there are videos on TikTok that teach people how to speak different languages.
Yeah.
There's videos on TikTok that teach people how to do math. I
Right.
tell them, I say, if I'd had all these videos on TikTok when I was in school,
Yeah.
I'd have been a multiple degree having person right now. Because
That's
they
right.
teaching people how to do math that people in school ain't teaching people how to do math. And these multiple languages that they teach, I think it was one that used to be in my algorithm. She was teaching people how to do Chinese and German. And I'm like, man, I wish I would have had this in school. I'd be
Yeah.
5 or 6 languages deep right about now.
Yeah.
And so as they're bashing it, I'm defending it because maybe you shouldn't be looking at what you're looking at.
Sure.
You give that stuff power.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
that's the difference. Is as you continue to say that it's this, it's that, then start looking at something different.
Yeah, I think societally we have sort of moved away from the idea of really needing to be personally disciplined, and truthfully, that is kind of an important part of the human experience, is being able to say no to things that, are more revealing of the darker sides of ourselves, right? Like that we all have those poles. And so, we live in a much more comfort filled world than really ever before. And I think a lot of that has sort of eroded our way to, delay gratification and walk away from the things that, might be tempting for us. Yeah, I think you're right. It's all what you make of it.
So let me ask, who was young Luci? What was young Luci's dreams and hopes, and what was her? Right now, it would be called a vision board. But what was her vision as a kid? What type of visions and dreams did she have?
What was my vision board? What was on my vision board when I was a kid?
What was young Luci's vision board?
Yeah, so I was raised in what I would appreciate is a pretty interesting family. So my mother is an immigrant. She's from Japan. She immigrated to the United States for school.
Nice.
My dad didn't end up putting school. She got pregnant with me, but that's, she came here because she's from a different place, very culturally different than Americans. The Japanese culture is very specific to itself. And my dad is a born and raised American. He was raised in deep South Carolina. So he kind of has his background. My dad is something of a doomsday prepper. That's kind of how I explain. He's a very avid hunter and outdoorsman, and is very skilled in survival mechanisms and things like that.
He live off the land.
He's got off-grid cabins scattered kind of everywhere, and just more gear than he would need in one life. Just so he's like I said, a pretty skilled and passionate outdoorsman. So I was raised in a family that put a lot of emphasis on self-sustainability. Like you need to be able to take care of yourself because nobody's going to do it for you. I was raised to have a pretty high value for paying really close attention to things, always being aware of what's happening around you, always being aware of potential risks, potential opportunities. And that was something that was sort of drilled into my mind for my entire time. And that shaped a lot of who I am. Just being able to pay attention to not only what's happening around you, but pay attention to the people that are in front of you and really listen. So I think, when I kind of started to form my own way, in early adolescence like you do, I've always had this idea in my mind of really wanting to cultivate a life of true freedom. You know, like the typical 9 to 5 grind has never really been appealing to me. And I was taught for it to not be appealing to me. And I'm grateful for that, even now. So I wanted to cultivate a life where I could, you know, really make a career out of the kind of things that I valued, and for that to be able to financially sustain me, you do need finances and money as a tool. But I wanted to be able to do it in a way where I could have a level of freedom and self sustainability in what I did. So that was kind of my like low resolution viewpoint. That was the general idea. Like I want to be a free person. I don't want to be a person who has any one specific. So, which I think is probably how a lot of teenagers feel. When you're just sort of figuring out who you are and how the world works. There's this pull for like, oh, I want to be able to go my own way. So when I got older, and I don't know if I said, but my mom was a preschool teacher when I was growing up, and she worked for the Head Start program, which is, I don't know how familiar you are with it, but it's a national program for early childhood education that kind of gears towards more families who are in like a low socioeconomic status bracket, or mental illness in the family, incarceration in the family.
It's been in existence since about 2003 now.
What?
Somewhere up in there. It's been in existence as a main program since about 2003, I want to say.
Yeah, exactly. So she was a teacher for the Head Start program, and I ended up when I was probably 17.
Don't y'all quote me on that year either. Don't y'all quote me on that year. I said about
something like
allegedly 2003, allegedly 2003. I put it like that, but 2000, yeah, allegedly. So yeah.
Right. Let the record reflect.
Let the record reflect.
But yeah. So right around 17, I actually went to work with her in one of the schools that she was working in, and that was kind of my first exposure to anything in the mental health realm outside of my own family. And I had even at that age, I had a very particular set of skills. And that's kind of what I like to say about myself, is that I am no jack of all trades. You want me to, do something with a car, can't do it. You have a math problem that you need solving, don't look at me. It's like, I have a very particular...
You're the opposite of Liam Neeson. He's like, hey, I got a particular set of skills.
He's like, I think he even says in that movie that he has a particular set of skills. That's not obvious to me at all. I think he has all of the skills.
Yeah, he got everything. He'll come get you
right
there at the exact location.
Is all of them. I have a very particular set of skills, and they are being extremely, extremely calm in de-escalation. Can engage with an escalated person in a very natural, nonchalant way. And I've kind of been that way for my whole life. And I would say the ability to look further past a person's, just the person that's in front of me, and hear the deeper story behind whatever it is that they say. That's my skill. And I really started to notice that in a greater way right around that time and working for that program. And that's when it kind of became, okay, maybe I need to be, maybe this is what I need to go in for. I'd considered many careers previously, but I always sort of loved psychology. I love to study social behavior and the human condition, and also things like philosophy and religious education. And so it's kind of the mesh of all of those things for me. I want to be a mental health professional. So that's what I did. And I went and from the Head Start program, I immediately kind of went to like the most extreme, mental health professional setting, which was I went and worked at an acute psychiatric hospital ward. And there I was kind of refined in my skill set and taught how to channel in a little bit more of a tactful way. Received some incredible training from really, really skilled professionals. And I took off from there.
That's, you said religious, what was that you called it?
Yeah. I mean, I've always been interested in religious narratives and kind of how that affects the world and how it affects our own value system.
Because I'm in the military, so in my deployment in 2006, when I was in that area of what is formerly called Mesopotamia, I was crossing the Euphrates River.
Okay.
And as I crossed the Euphrates River, I was like, man, I wonder how far from the Garden of Eden I am. And so that's what kept me going is realizing that there's people in the Bible that walked those places before I did, and trying to match up what was then versus what was now. And so
what a dream.
Some of my most memorable time is that much like the people in the Bible, they walked it so we can read about it. I was there so my parents can see about it. So I was taking pictures, and when I crossed the Euphrates River, I called them on like, hey, I just crossed the Euphrates River. Of course, that was in 2006. Phones aren't like they are now.
Right.
So, I was still buying the disposable cameras. And so I have those pictures somewhere in my files and folders somewhere. And so, it's even seeing the city of Ur, where Abraham left, and, buying the ziggurats and stuff like that, sending them all home to mom and dad so they can have those mementos. Because I knew, first off, they don't get on planes. So they would never make the trip to see that. But sending all those statues and pyramids and stuff home and seeing those and taking the pictures of them, it's put me in a biblical text too, because I was also seeing what they couldn't see and relaying the message for what they could see. That's why when you said that, I'm like, I'm kind of like a religious historian too, because I'm always looking at the different TV shows now on Disney Channel or YouTube or somewhere. I'm like, man, let me this is interesting. Let me see what I need to find out, because there's something there. Let me see this. Man, that's interesting. But at the same time, I'm doing it as research because I may run an episode off of it. Josh Gates, the guy off Expedition Files, he does a lot of Indiana Jones stuff, and a lot of the things that he does, I'm like, oh man, that looks like it's going to be a future episode. I'm writing down the title, I'm pausing, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, boom, got it. So that's how a lot of my episodes come up, is they will be, I see it on the TV show, or I get this email from Interesting Facts, because right now I'm in the middle of the 7 influential kingdoms of Africa, and that came from the shortest war, which next season will be the longest war. And so, it takes me different locations. So, it's I'm a history buff, as I say, because as I put them here, then the story would never be lost. And that's what I don't like. The story's always lost. So I even came up with a quote. So that's the good thing about it.
It's true. I think there used to be so much intentionality behind preserving, just preserving people's stories. That used to be like a big deal. People are going to want to know about this, and over time, especially I would say in this generation now, we are losing the consideration
precious monuments.
Right. We're losing the consideration of all that's come before us, and even what will come after. And I think that's a real. I I think that's a real tragedy, and I think there's going to be some pretty substantial social consequences for that. And I think anytime I come across somebody who's being intentional about those kinds of things, I'm like, what you're doing is very good. Because if we lose connection to the past, and if we lose connection to the mothers and fathers that have come before us, right? Then we lose a piece of ourselves, a pretty important piece of ourselves too. And that sort of fragmentation is deeply wounding, and it can be prevented.
It most certainly can, and it can be prevented by simply me continuing to do those shows.
Yeah.
And all those episodes can be found on any podcast, any platform. Make sure you go listen to Hell I Don't Know.
And that's, it's so true. It really is simple things. It sounds like it's this really like big grandiose idea that's not attainable, but the truth is the day-to-day application of it looks like, when you learn something of historical significance, tell somebody about it. Sit down with your grandparents. Ask them what it's been like to be them. Grandpa, what has it been like to be you? Just simple things like that start to put into perspective our own lives and the why behind we are, like the why behind why we are who we are, and there's something to be said for that humans at certain times throughout our lives need to feel small and like we are a part of something much larger than ourselves. And just because that is the truth, like we need to be able to come into contact with that truth at certain times throughout our life. And that's one of the big ways that we do it, is to say, I'm here because somebody else made certain decisions in their life. And now here I am,
Yeah. I tell people all the time, I say, you can't do anything about stuff that happened before you got here.
That's right.
So you can be upset about it, but you can't be frustrated and mad about it because it happened before you got here.
Right.
I said, but what you can't handle is what you do with the information and how you take care of the information that goes from you after you. I said, that's all you have control of.
Right.
But, a lot of people get frustrated about everything that happened before them.
Yeah.
And they lose focus on how they're handling information that passes through them that's supposed to handle after them.
Sure.
I want to sit down with pops, moms. My aunt just passed. She was 93. And, she lived a life all the way up until the last day.
Wow.
And so she was born in 1930. And so that's family information that's now passed over. And so, but I still have other relatives that I can sit down with and be like, hey, how's life been for everyone? And right now, this episode is being brought to you by water. It's good for you. Tastes good. It keep you going. Every now and then, you got to have your good old swig of water. I want to apologize because I usually do an opening quote, but the conversation has been so immaculate that I forgot to do my opening quote. So let me get back to my opening quote. My opening quote is, only people who are capable of loving strongly can also suffer great sorrow. But this same necessity of loving serves to counteract their grief and heals them. That is a quote from Leo Tolstoy. What do you think about that quote?
Well, I think that, I think the quote kind of speaks for itself. What I would say, one of the things that we know in psychology, and this is something that psychology has learned from other disciplines like physics and biology, is that everything in the universe has an equal and opposite reaction, right? I think that one of the things that I've seen demonstrated over and over again in my clinical practice and, just being able to have the opportunity to sort of watch people is that oftentimes the greatest suffering that we endure as humans is as a direct result of the things that we hold most dear. And we kind of talked a little bit about like the function of emotions and why exactly we have them. And one of the things about sadness, one of the sort of signals that sadness has to offer us is it tells us what we value.
I was talking about the quote from Leo Tolstoy.
The quote.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You want me to read it again? Yeah, I'm gonna read it again.
Sure.
The quote: "Only people who are capable of loving strongly can also suffer great sorrow, but this some necessity of loving serves to counteract their grief and heals them." Like I said, that is a quote from Leo Tolstoy. So what do you think about that quote? You started off by saying that it pretty much speaks for itself, but what is the rest of your explanation from your field and just your dealings in life with what Tolstoy said?
Absolutely. I think this fits really nicely into, we were originally going to have a conversation about grief. I can tell you, and it might be helpful for me to kind of contextualize that quote into the clinical literature and what psychology tells us about emotions and what psychology tells us about feeling. So the first thing I would say is that all emotions come with a function. Like there's an actual reason why we have emotions. So much of our design is intentional, and our whole nervous system is set up to help keep us alive. And emotions are part of that, right? And one of the things that emotions do for us, among tons of other things, is that they have a way of signaling to us the things that we value and the things that are important to us, right? So, like I was saying, if I lose a family member and I experience overwhelming grief, really sad about, that loss, one of the things that signals to me is it makes it more real to me how important this person was. You know what I mean? Like the hole that this person has left for me is real because this person was super important to me. Or if I lose an opportunity and I experience real grief and disappointment over that, something that I have learned, something that emotion is teaching me is that, something about this opportunity was important to me. What is it? And it kind of, when you go a little bit deeper into your emotions, you'll find that there is lessons in all of that, right? And sorrow and grief are no different. Every period of suffering that we experience as human beings has something to offer us in terms of teaching us what's important to us and what we value and where our hearts really are. Now, the thing about grief is that it is most commonly tied to loss of a connection, right? So loss of a romantic relationship, loss of a family member, loss of a child. These are the things that tend to grieve us the most.
A pet in most cases.
Yeah, or a pet. Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the things that we know to be true in terms of the clinical literature is that if the grief is caused by loss of a connection with something, then it so must be healed in connection, right? Like it is the connection itself that will help us metabolize the bigness of that emotion. You know what I mean? So when I have clients that come to me with a breakup or loss of an important family member, one of the first things that I'm going to kind of take inventory of is what does this person's other support system look like? Do they have friends? Do they have other family members? Do they have a church community or, a hobby community? What does their other connections look like? And are they strong enough to carry the weight of this loss with them? Because that's going to be one of the most important parts of that healing process. Because grief is meant to be a relational process. Right? Grief is something that we are meant to experience in connection with other people. It's not just something that we're supposed to carry alone. We're not resourced for it.
It's too heavy.
That's just not really how it's supposed to work. It's too heavy. That's right. So when you can have a person that comes alongside you and says, it's not too heavy for me. It's not too heavy for me.
It's not too heavy for us.
But it like I said, it helps metabolize the grief. Like the connection that you have with others will help you heal from a connection that you lost in another context. It's endlessly important. It's endlessly important. And yeah, what that is, and I'm so appreciating how difficult that is. We live in a society today that does not foster vulnerability very well. Vulnerability in society today is not often rewarded. Like when you have a bad day at work, typically consequences for that, or when you have some kind of emotional outburst in a grocery store, you might get the cops called on you or something like that.
Yeah.
Like we do not live in a society that rewards vulnerability. There's a reason for that, but alongside that is, well, if that's the case, we're going to have to do some intentional work to bring ourselves back to a place of feeling okay, being vulnerable with our closest family and friends, our closest loved ones, which is not an easy thing to do, but it is kind of one of those things that once you do it once, it gets you a little bit easier the next time. You do it twice, it's a little bit easier on, vulnerability moment 3. When you start to learn that the people that you cognitively know are probably trustworthy, like you love these people and you live life with these people and you kind of have the context for, yeah, I can probably trust these people. But when it's tested, those are the moments where your nervous system really starts to learn, like, oh, okay, I actually can count on this person. And that itself is healing. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So in episode 56, you said you listened to it. That was the first episode this season, and I talked about grief with Miss Christina Jones. During that episode, we had both had brought information that me and Miss Jones had also experienced grief ourselves. So it made that episode particularly interesting to do that episode. But the episode actually started in episode 55, the What Now episode, where we started talking about grief. And I said, hey, you should come back for 56 so we can talk about grief in the next episode. So that brought along these 7 stages. And as I had done the research, I'd already knew about the 7 stages of grief. But during research, for all of you that are listening, depending on what you find when you do your research, you can find 5, you can find 7, you can find 12. And what I'm going to tell you is the original 5 are basic steps. They start to progress and get more information when you start to look at if you look at the 7, it's the basic 5. If you look at the 12, it's just the 7 with more information. So depending on what stages you are, you're still the basic 5 stages. It's just more information added to each stage. But right now, I'm up to actually step 3, anger and bargaining. And since I have Miss Luci here, how often do people get stuck in between pain and guilt and anger and bargaining? Because it's a tricky step, because pain and guilt sometimes is confused with anger and bargaining. How often do you see people get stuck in between the stages?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say one of the things that I find to be true in clinical practice, I don't really want to quantify it, but in most cases, is that anger is typically a cover emotion for a deeper emotion. That's what I find is the case most of the time. How often do people get stuck? I think kind of like in the beginning of the podcast when we talked about how emotions are meant to be experienced in fullness. One of the things that I think is interesting about some of the narrative around the different stages of anger is that it is often talked about as if that they are steps that you are supposed to take in order to ultimately attain acceptance. And I don't think that's true. And I'll tell you why. I think that if emotions are meant to be experienced, and if emotions have something to offer us, if they have something to teach us, and if they are direct, subcortical results of stimuli, meaning like something happens, you experience the emotion, then trying to fit emotions into the mold of certain steps that we are supposed to take can hinder the natural process of things, I think. That's the first thing. So I would say a lot of times people get stuck. And I don't know that I necessarily would think about it as being stuck. I would think about it more like if somebody's spending a little bit more time in their guilt or in their anger or in their, states of bargaining, I would say to them, well, it sounds to me like there's something that this is trying to teach you that we haven't learned yet. We probably need to be spending a little bit more time here because there's probably something that we haven't pulled from it yet is going to be important for you later on, because that is the reason why emotions exist. Emotions are teachers that have been given. So I think when we change the framework around how we think of emotions, I see a lot of people that, become guilty for feeling angry about something, or anger is an uncomfortable emotion for them, so they just want to push it away. They don't want to be angry. They don't want to feel guilty about things. But one of the things that I say is your emotions are autonomic processes, meaning you don't have control over when an emotion presents itself. You do have control over kind of what you do with it from there, and there are certain aspects of the emotional experience that we can manipulate. But the emotion itself rises up from subcortical structures in the brain that we don't control. It's an autonomic process. So if I said to you, for example, and it kind of sounds silly, but if I said to you, it is not okay for you in this context to blink. It's not okay. You can't do it. This is not an appropriate environment for you to be blinking, or the fact that you're blinking right now, this isn't an appropriate time for that. That would be difficult. You would find some pretty creative ways to try to not blink, right? Like you'd put some effort into that, and we do the same thing in avoiding emotions, but the fact of the matter is they cannot be avoided. And if we would, instead of trying to speed along our emotional process or try to push down our emotional process, if we would instead follow it to where it's supposed to take us, learn from it what we're supposed to learn from it, then you've given it all the permission that it needs to move on. Does that make sense?
That's a great
explanation? Okay.
That's a great explanation, because if you're not learning what you're supposed to learn in the first 3 stages, then you're just regressing to get through the stages. So you can tell someone, I'm good, I already been through the stages. Because you have to learn your lesson at each stage to see why they have those 5 stages. But a lot of times we try to make pain into panger.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and a lot of times our panger is not a stage. It's you trying to create a new stage instead of going through the pain itself.
It's you trying to avoid an emotion.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's grief. Grief as a process is obviously incredibly uncomfortable. But one of the things that I talk about with my clients a lot is like I said, if you experience a loss of something that's really important to you, you lose somebody that you really love, you lose something that you really, really wanted, you should feel sad. Because if you didn't, it would mean that there was a flaw somewhere in that connection. You know, like something didn't, the circuit wasn't quite correctly connected in terms of that specific connection. You know, just like, you know, something really good happens to you, you win the lottery, you know, you should feel joy.
I'm going to feel joy. I'm going to feel sad too. I'm going to be like, I can't believe it happened.
And so, you know, emotions, we have them for a reason. They have a purpose. And one of the things that we also recognize in psychology is anything that we repress comes back stronger than it was before. And the reason why is that all emotions are, physiologically, is energy in the body, but for the purposes of explanation, I'm going to call it electricity. That's not quite right, but it's like, it's right adjacent.
For right now to be right.
Yeah, exactly.
Let the record energy, state for right now that's going to be right.
it's like electrical impulses that pass between them. But when emotional experience is created within the body, there is a physiological cycle that is supposed to complete. Essentially, we call this the serotonin reuptake system. And if a wrench is thrown in that cycle, when we are repressing our emotions and just refusing to feel the emotional experience, it's not like that energy that's circulating just goes away. That's not how it works. It gets stuck. But eventually, and usually when we least expect it to and when it's not super convenient, that cycle will start to go again. Because, you know, you can't just constantly be focusing on repressing an emotion. Essentially, your natural systems are going to do what they do again. And so, not only that, but it comes back stronger than it was before because, again, your emotions are trying to get you to notice something and they're trying to get you to learn something. And it will just progress and progress and progress until you go there, you know. And that's when it starts to become like really uncomfortable. And that's when people get into situations where they feel like their emotions are just so unbearable. And it's because, well, you have years of repressed emotions that are just now catching up to you. And that's bound to be uncomfortable. That's usually when I see people come to therapy.
So it's safe to say that once these emotions are repressed from the first 3 stages, that it could become stage 4 like depression, because you're repressing them. You're repressing all these things because as humans, that's what we do because we want to put up the front that we're stronger than. And so we don't want to ask for help. We don't want to do this. We don't want to do this. No, this is not happening, which is denial. So y'all know. Well, why is this happening? Hey, let this be me. Bargaining. So, you know, you go through all of these things, but at the same time, you're repressing them. And that becomes a depressed stage because after a while, you put so much on yourself that you can't handle, that you don't realize that you're just moving without even knowing that you're walking. That's depression because you're in such a vegetative stage, I should say, that most vegetables don't even know they're being moved from one place to another. That's depression because it's
true. Yeah. Well, it's I've heard clients describe depression in a lot of different ways. Some people describe it as like a dark cloud that's sort of hanging over their head. Some people describe it as the feeling of having like multiple. Oh, there's 2 of you. What is happening? I see 2 screens of yours. One of them is black and one of them is you.
So that's
is that okay?
That's depression. That's reflection.
Yeah.
So
There you go.
Because as I was saying
That's
that,
the way
it,
to.
it
But yeah,
blacked
so
out and then it came back in. So it's just, I don't,
yeah, that's funny,
yeah.
right? This is just gonna go with it. But yeah, I've heard clients describe depression in a lot of different ways, and truthfully, depression as a clinical physiological phenomenon is that there is a wrench thrown into your natural serotonin system
Mm.
that is keeping it from doing what it needs to do. That's what it is. Like your serotonin levels are not circulating the way they're
They're
supposed
all out
to
of whack.
throughout your brain. And so it's yeah. And so depression oftentimes I've heard a lot of clients describe it as just feeling stuck in time. And actually there's a physiological basis for that because your serotonin system is stuck. It's literally stuck. Um and so it's and it takes intervention. It does to kind of get that running again. And, you know, there are lots of different ways to do that depending on the person, but it can be done. Um, you know, but I always encourage people that are going through grief to not conceptualize this experience as, well, I just need to go through these things so that eventually I feel okay about this thing. Because typically speaking, when we feel grief about a situation, something not very okay, right? And it is perfectly fine if you lose somebody that you love and then 10 years later you still cry about it. I would call that, I would see that as an indicator of emotional well-being, actually. Um, you know, and the idea of acceptance being the final stage of grief is accepting the pain of the grief. It's not accepting the event. It's accepting, okay, this is a thing that's happened, and this is gonna hurt, and it might hurt forever, but that's okay because I have tools, and I have you know, and I have these other connections that carry me, and if this hurts forever, then it'll hurt forever.
And that's the positive
And it's
thing.
okay.
It's once you go through anger management, depression, grief management, any of that, make sure you pick up and learn the tools because next time you go through it, you have those tools to keep you from being in that corner again. I tell people all the time,
Absolutely.
if you put yourself in the corner, then why can't you take yourself out? If you put yourself in a box per se, then why can't you take yourself out? Depression is no different. Sure enough, you're sitting in a dark room, but the dark room has some type of light in it. You just have to be willing and wanting enough to see it because someone has turned it on for you to see it. It's just as right now, you can't see it. Someone is standing there. They're always there. You just can't hear them. But eventually, you will be able to hear them. Uh, on your page, you have a phrase, and it's close to the end of your page. It says, grounded in psychology, rooted in Christ. How did that
Yeah.
saying come about?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, well, so for my private practice, I run a faith-based counseling agency. This has been kind of a dream and vision of mine for several years. I've worked in exclusively secular counseling spaces. So I've never done exclusively faith-based practicing before. I have clients through the years that faith is a part of their day-to-day experience and they want to integrate it. And I always, have been able to. But as far as like catering to that specifically and specializing in that, that's new for me. And I'm incredibly grateful to be here. But yeah, so my practice now is faith-based, and essentially what that means for me is that, I'm a person who, I would identify myself as, being a follower of the person of Jesus. And, I'm deeply interested in the way that the biblical narrative impacts the world and the way that we draw value from them. I have a real interest in like archetypes and, just the common stories that you see throughout the world, the the common fairy tales that you kind of see in a lot of different contexts. And I think the Bible is kind of the root of all of that, just historically speaking. And so when I decided to go into this practice and that I was going to, actually make it faith-based, like I want to cater to clients who are interested in being a Christian counselor. I meet a lot of, I have met a lot of Christian counselors who either, and I feel like this is almost going to sound like a criticism, and I don't mean it to, but I've met a lot of Christian counselors who either have very limited clinical training, like Christian counselors who are pastors or, youth leaders, things like that, and they haven't gone to school or anything like that for psychology, mental health treatment. Or I meet Christian counselors who are clinically trained, have advanced degrees, but their biblical knowledge is quite limited, right? And so I set out to start a practice where I can hopefully, I pray daily for the Lord to help me do it well, but I would like to offer people a space for both. And so that's where that comes from. I wanted to match my clinical knowledge and my psychological training with my personal walk with the person of Jesus, and that's what I'm hoping to do here.
That's amazing. You can start with changing your verbiage, because your verbiage makes a big difference in how you perceive everything that's going to happen. Instead of saying that's what I'm hoping to do, you can also be saying that's what I'm going to do. That's what I am doing. And that changes how your walk is, because you understand that someone's already walking with you, and the pathway has already been laid for you to do that. Because if it wasn't made for you to do it, the idea wouldn't have been presented and given to you to unwrap to do. So the verbiage makes a big difference for our walk with the Creator, because
that's true. It's a good reminder. And ultimately, I came into this, and this has been really years in the making for me, something that I've been praying about for a long time. I'd say probably 3 or 4 years. One of the things that I have experienced as a clinician, as a clinician who personally is a believer working in secular spaces, is that there is a certain hostility sometimes towards any kind of biblical narrative in the mental health space. There's a lot of sort of resistance to that, and a lot of that does come from the very real experiences that people have had of being harmed in the church, or we could talk about the roots of it all day long, but ultimately it's something that I've seen, it's something that I have experienced, and I have noticed in a lot of places that when I tell a colleague, oh yeah, I'm a Christian, there's this very noticeable discomfort. And so that was something that I was prepared to encounter. Well, this is something that I was preparing to encounter in starting this practice. And ultimately, there was some fear around it for me, a little bit of, anxiety. But ultimately, I came to this point where I was like, listen, this is what I'm offering people, and it won't be everybody's cup of tea. Not everybody wants to see a Christian counselor, and that's fine. If you don't want to see a Christian counselor, don't come see me. There are many, many, many talented, skilled, sharp, smart counselors in the world, therapists, counselors, psychologists who can offer you the same or more clinical knowledge than what I can offer you. But I also know that there is a group of people who would like to see a counselor and who would like to bring their life stuff to a counselor who they know shares a similar value to them personally. And they also want to know that they can trust the person's clinical skills, and that they have a certain level of, training. So And, that is that's what I'm offering people. And for the people that want it, I'm here. For the people that don't want it, I'm more than happy to give people referrals. I'm more than happy to point people in the right direction if I'm not giving what they're looking for. But if I am offering what they're looking for, I'm grateful to meet them.
That's awesome. The disciples was looking for the gift. They was preparing themselves for the gift, but they wasn't preparing themselves to show it off to the world because the world wasn't ready to see it. So
Yeah.
there's a different preparation than there is from opening the gift than it is to showing everybody what you got. Some are ready to open it and show it. Some aren't ready to see it. You just have to continue doing the job that the Lord gave you to do. And you can't be worried about those that aren't ready to see what the Lord gave you to look at and show off. Miss Luci, I appreciate you stopping by today to have this conversation at the Lighthouse. And
it was my joy.
As we had this amazing conversation, despite all of the complications, we still made it through, which is interesting because if any of you've ever been to a lighthouse, you know that the storms come to the lighthouse and the water is always crashing into the lighthouse. Only the true people who are able to sit in the lighthouse and look at it as not being a problem are the ones that are able to push through. We pushed through.
We did.
Yes, we did. Miss Luci, you are welcome back anytime you want to discuss, talk about anything. My format is always open to such gracious people. Anytime I need to do a bonus episode, anytime you want to just drop some facts on the people, just let me know. I'll set it up. But for right now, feel free to promote yourself and let the people know how they can get in touch with your company and you.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Yes. So my website is Lighthouse Co Counseling, so lighthouse.co-counseling.com. That's where you can learn a little bit more about my practice and background information about me and my team, as well as sign up for services. So I do offer, of course, individual counseling services. I also am offering some limited slots for couples counseling. Those are almost full at this point, but I think I do have 2 slots for couples counseling at the moment. I am also offering a service that I'm calling sort of like a consultation service, and essentially I'm offering that to ministry professionals and church leaders, or really anybody who wants to learn more about mental health. So that can look like me sitting down with you, having a one-on-one meeting, answering any questions that you might have about mental health or how to properly address that within a religious context. Or that can look like me coming to your church, meeting with your youth ministry team, meeting with your missionaries, whatever it might be, teaching you how to recognize a mental health concern and how to properly support people in your congregation, or just, people that you encounter that have mental health concerns, in a way that's going to, of course, honor the truth that you are, professing to teach in these spaces, as well as actually be tangibly helpful for them. So that's another thing that I'm offering. And I also have one group that I'm doing, a group counseling, grief and loss support group. Anybody can join that anytime. In the coming months, I am going to be opening up registration for more groups. And at some point, I hope to bring on a group facilitator to help me kind of carry that caseload. So be on the lookout for that. I've been working with my team. As far as social media, right now I'm only on Instagram and Facebook. I am working on potentially doing other things like TikTok, and I'm not super familiar with all of the social platforms. I'm hoping to bring on somebody that can help me with that at some point. But my Instagram page is where I'm most engaged, and that is just Lighthouse Counseling. Same for Facebook. So you can find it.
Make sure y'all take advantage of all of that interesting information. With that being said, I will leave y'all with this final thought. No matter what life has in store for you, or people tried to do to you or for you. Remember, I want you to know this little fact. If you move swiftly, you move slowly, and you do it at your own pace. Remember, you're doing it on your own time slot. You're doing it at your own time. And you're not rushing, but you're living life till its fullest. I'll bless you all later. I'll see you all next time. Miss Luci, appreciate you joining us.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. Thank you. It's my joy.
Such a great episode that we sat in at the Lighthouse.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. This was fun. This was really fun.